And we're on.
Ron. Good morning, good day, everyone. If anyone is on YouTube, good day, and we would love for you to join so that we could see you, because there's not very many of us, to say it mildly. Hi, Ruth. Good morning. Thank you for joining. He seems to have left. All right. Well, just what?
You're still there.
They are? I don't see them. Ah, yes. Hello. If you would like to let us know who you are and let us see you, that would be great. Or send a message in the chat. So, continuing to reflect a bit to this morning on the 6 perfections, and we are, that's who you are. Hi. Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Thank you for showing yourself. So we're continuing with our reflections on the 6 perfections, which we've also been talking about on Teaching Tuesdays. Really a very nice discussion, Nathaniel and Renee bringing forward sutras that most of us, including me, have not read before, some of them newly translated. I encourage you, when and if you have time, to go on YouTube and listen to the Teaching Tuesdays, the Dharma explorations that we've had, these since September. In any case, good morning, Kaiso and Janet. Hi. The perfections, as you know, and I want to think about together for a moment. So it's paramita in Sanskrit and parchin in Tibetan. And what it literally means, ita is from the verb to go, and parama means like over there. So it gets translated as go to the other shore. And literally, that's what it means, to go there, to go further, to go over there where I want to find myself. And it gets translated as the perfections, which doesn't quite do what that word does. It also gets translated as the 6 transcendences, which is, going to the other shore seems kind of like horizontal, and the transcendences seem like high and up there and maybe unrelated to this world. So that's why once in a while, I feel it's good to pause on the more literal meaning of, it means to go there. And also one of the sutras, the Pancha Paramita Nirdesha Sutra, the teaching on the 5 perfections, which is one of the sutras that Nathaniel brought forward, very interestingly says we should feel that we have already attained it, that we have already arrived at the further shore. We have already transcended. And that's a very interesting statement coming from a sutra, because it really seems to take on some of the ambience of, as you know, Tantra and Dzogchen practices, where we emphasize that we are already where we need to be. We already have the Buddha nature, which, by the way, is our topic starting in January, a very significant topic for us. So it's interesting to note that already early on in the Buddhist tradition, we have this invitation to imagine that we're already there. And of course, one way to imagine and feel that we are already there is to practice them and to feel that we are moving in that direction, in the direction which will turn out to be, from a Dzogchen and Tantric point of view, already our real nature. So transcend, in a way, is, in one way, we're actually not going anywhere. We're going more into what we haven't noticed we already have. But experientially, that does indeed feel like a movement toward something that, at the very least, we haven't recognized, even if in some sense it's already in our purview. So we encourage ourselves that, even though it has this fancy name of perfection or transcendence in English, or this rather lovely image of going to the further shore, we also cultivate a sense of being very ready. You know, you've got the boat, you know how to swim. Maybe you walk on water in your imagination. You know, you have a way to get there. And this is very important. You know, the Mahayana Sutras, maybe the Buddhist tradition in general, really has this kind of balancing act between, especially starting with the Mahayana. You know, the Buddha is just so unimaginably extraordinary, not just a very good human like the early Buddhist tradition feels. And I feel it's very nice to be introduced to the Buddha as a very good human. Gautama, our friend, Shakyamuni, who practiced so hard for 6 years. And because, and in fact, the Buddha says, or at least that he really is just showing what it looks like to go from an ordinary state to our real nature, our already real nature as an awakened being. So there's this kind of, you might say, dialogue between our situation as humans, which is, you know, we've been wrong about things and misbehaving since beginningless time. So there's a lot to cover and undo there. On the other hand, we have a mind that is luminous already in the early Theravada tradition. Luminous is the mind. It gets polluted by incoming defilements. So stuff happens. But the mind is fundamentally luminous. And then when we come to the Mahayana, we hear over and over again, we have the Buddha nature, we have every possibility. This is actually our spiritual inheritance, to be fully awakened. And when we get to Tantra and Dzogchen, we hear there's actually nothing to do. But in order not to do anything, we practice to get to the point where we really can just rest in our natural splendor. So we move between these two poles. It's really a tremendous accomplishment that will take tremendous effort over countless eons. We are taught that. And then we're also taught about the one moment Buddha. So somewhere in between that, being human and a Buddha too, we are practicing. And the sutras also offer an antidote to feeling discouraged. This from one of the early sutras. If even 100 or 1,000 can gain Buddhahood, why should I not? There are Buddhas equal to the number of grains of sand on the Ganges. It might seem a long time, 3 incalculable eons, before we might attain Buddhahood, but on the other hand, even a greater number, equally at least incalculable number of Buddhas have already been accomplished. So why should we not? Why should I slack? Why should I be discouraged? So this is a very wonderful attitude to bring to our practice. In some sense, it's already done, but we don't know that, so we have to find it out, and we find it out by practicing. And in the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, Shantideva's masterpiece, The Way of the Bodhisattva, charts out the stages. And Pato Rinpoche, as you may remember, lays out a very simple table of contents, that the first 3 chapters are about gaining this aspiration to awaken for the sake of all beings. We need to have that aspiration. That takes some blessing, feeling blessed by the Buddhas, feeling animated, thus, just by looking around at all of the suffering in the world, which is, I think, more and more unbearable. And what can I do? Whatever we may do practically, from the Buddhist perspective, it will have limits, be limited to this lifetime and to the number of people we can help in this lifetime. But we definitely, and ever as much as we can, we must do. And then once having developed this aspiration, and mind you, just the interest in having the aspiration already makes us part of the Mahayana. I don't really think I can do it, but gosh, it seems like a great thing. I'm all for people awakening to this aspiration. Even that, even a little inclination is you're already in the Mahayana. You're already in the stream. We are all in the stream. We have definitely thought about it, definitely aspired to it, had precious teachings, made promises to ourselves, to our teachers. So then, having developed this, how does it not deteriorate? And that's where we practice mindfulness, carefulness, vigilance, and patience. Patient with ourselves. And then through effort, concentration, and wisdom, we increase it. We increase our bodhicitta, and finally in the dedication as well. So concentration, the 8th chapter, is part of our process of increasing more and more. And concentration is an interesting chapter. It talks about, of course, concentration is, I'll just remind you, I think you all know, in the Buddhist and also the non-Buddhist Indian traditions, is a big category. It means developing shamatha or calm abiding, which means we are capable, and there are 9 states of calm abiding. And finally, we get to be able to one-pointedly remain on an object for as long as we wish without effort. And that is called the approach to the first jhana, which means that's the approach to the first level of concentration on what's called the form realm. And there are 4 concentrations. And then there are what are called the 4 absorptions on the formless realm, where one doesn't have a form body. One is a kind of a deity, but still within cyclic existence, not free, not liberated, experience nothingness, beyond nothingness, the peak of cyclic existence, very, very deep states. We can say, it's interesting, we can say high states. We also say deep states of concentration. First of all, though, we have to deal with distraction. The sutras and Shantideva himself, the main thing that we're seeking to do as human beings, and for Buddhists, we don't really necessarily aspire for Mahayana. Unlike Theravada, maybe it's too strong to say we don't necessarily aspire to the full force of the form and formless realm concentrations, but we don't want to be born there because we want to be out of cyclic existence. So even if you do have a very high level of concentration, from the perspective of Mahayana, we must dedicate it not to rebirth in these high states, but to awakening for the benefit of all beings. But back to the 8th chapter and to us with our busy lives and our constant distractions. The world is geared more than ever before in 21 centuries to mesmerize us in distraction. And it's become a real problem socially. And I think we all know the attraction of the cell phone, okay? That's what distraction is. So dealing with distraction is really the issue. And Shantideva in his first verse in this chapter says, a person whose mind is distracted stands between the fangs of the defilements. Emily showed us, she has a new t-shirt with a sparkling tiger, right? Tigers, I guess snakes have fangs, you know, those sharp. Anyway, it's a great image, right? Here we are when we're distracted. Oh, thank you, Emily. Okay. Right between the fangs of a tiger, a lion, a snake. Oh, I must remember this next time, which will surely be very soon. I pick up my cell phone. There I am. You know, not because I really need to check anything, just because it's a habit. There I am between the fangs of the tiger. That's enough, okay? If you take away that image, okay, there I go again. Distraction doesn't occur, he says, if body and mind are kept sequestered. Now, Shantideva is going to go on to emphasize the benefits of living in solitude, being in solitary retreat. That is probably a possibility for us sometimes. You know, even Ajahn Rinpoche said, even for one day, you know, a whole weekend, maybe a week, 10 days, months, but even one day to sequester ourselves. And at the very least, once or twice, maybe even 3 times a day, even for a short time, sequester yourself, body and mind at rest. Can just sound awe. Really, with a lot of practice, sounding awe, and it will take us to a place, maybe just kind of land in a state where you're not distracted for a bit. In other words, as much as we can practice non-distraction, there we are. It's important. It's important even to hear this again and again and again. I realized how much benefit I feel from, you know, on Tuesday nights, Nathaniel and Renee are talking about sutras. Some of them I've heard, you know, hundreds of times. Some of them not at all, but they all come to the same point: lessen distraction. And so we have to think in our own lives, what can we do to lessen distraction? We need to look at our phones. We need to do email. We need to relax also. We do need to relax. There's permission to relax, enjoy. Relaxation doesn't have to be coexistent with distraction, does it? Maybe that's a koan. Mostly, I think, though, when we generally think of relaxing, we think of, you know, spacing out. Not always. You take a walk, be in nature, sit in your backyard, listen to the birds, look at the sky. Now, what's very interesting about this chapter to me is that pretty soon, Shantideva starts talking about all the ways in which people are distracting to us, which we can't help noticing in our lifetime. Some people, including the people we hear about on the news. And this is important. So Shantideva says, realizing that someone who is well attuned to insight, we need a degree of calm and quiet in order to accomplish the wisdom that will free us. You know, in secular culture, everybody wants to relax, to reduce stress. That's certainly good. As bodhisattvas, we want people to be as healthy as they can be. But as Buddhist practitioners, we also know that there's something to be understood that will completely transform the way we are in the world, the way we are in our bodies. So in order to get to that, and that's wisdom, our topic starting in January, in order to get to, and actually this Tuesday, we're talking about the perfection of wisdom. In January, Buddha nature, which is another way of encouraging us and inviting us and showing us what wisdom feels like. Realizing that we need insight and realizing that we need peace of mind in order to accomplish that, because this is what destroys the defilements. First, we need to seek some kind of peace. So at the beginning of a session, ideally, we spend time, you know, if we're doing Ngondro or other kinds of practices, we spend time just being with our breath for 21 minutes, for 21 breaths. The problem is that being around people is distracting. We get very attached to them. This doesn't mean to have love and kindness for your friends. It doesn't mean don't have warm, meaningful relationships. But Shantideva is talking about the perniciousness of being attached to people beyond what's possible. No one will accompany us throughout the rest of our journey through cyclic existence. That's the last. That's a big sorrow. But that's what will occur. So we somehow have to reckon with that. And we do. We practice a lot to understand impermanence. We don't see things as they really are, Shantideva says. we lose our sense of spiritual urgency. We get entranced by the mundane, movies, videos, vicious conversations on the internet or in person. Associating with fools invariably goes bad. What is gained? So that we're either too attached or we're with people who will influence us badly. And he goes on like this for quite a while. I think we're all quite aware of the ways in which we get involved. We can't blame this on the other people, which is what we tend to do. They're bad, they're wrong, they're politically not particularly noxious politically. I'm right to get all riled up about them, but am I? What's more important to me? My peaceful mind, which is a basis for wisdom, or getting riled up about these people who I don't even know and have no opportunity actually to influence? The fact that Shantideva spends a good amount of time on this, on the irritations and therefore the afflictions that we engage in because of being in contact with other people, finally helps me understand. I've been asking myself this question and reading the first part of the chapter in light of this question. So the most famous part of the 8th chapter is starting with verse 90, where Shantideva starts to talk about how to cultivate the 4 boundless states, really how to cultivate his 4 phases of developing bodhicitta, especially reckoning with equanimity, feeling that, the famous words, everyone wants happiness as much as I do. Why should I wish it only for myself? The logic of that, it seems to me, is undefeatable. But do we remember it? Do we live like that? So, having spent the first part of the chapter talking about all the ways in which we dissipate our energy with respect to people that we like too much, or at least in an unhelpful manner, people that drive us crazy, verse 90 to the rest of the chapter is all about cultivating first a sense of being equal with others in a very specific sense of wanting happiness and not wanting suffering. Obviously, people are different. We are unequal, and people have different kinds of good and negative qualities. But that's not as important as our being equal. We all want happiness just as much. We really don't want pain. And it's helpful. I mean, that's why we sing that verse, as we will in the beginning of our practice session. Every day, it was in our daily prayers years back in Geshe-Wangel in the 70s. Every day it's part of our prayer. May all beings, be free, because that's what they want, to be free. May they have happiness. That's what they want, be free. It's like a fundamental core orientation that we seek to develop. So in essence, Shantideva seems to be saying in this chapter, don't put your energy into distractions that arise around other people. Sequester yourself. And then we have to figure out in our modern context, not living in a monastery, families, work, just this world we have to deal with. How do we sequester ourselves enough? Well, daily practice, even when you don't feel like it, even when you're sure it's going to be a terrible practice because you're so whacked out tired or whacked out irritated, it doesn't matter. I can tell you it doesn't matter. You just sit and do your practice. So that's sequestering. And then the big point, really, of the chapter on concentration is, well, cultivate it as much as you can, even a few short sessions a day, even saying, before you, start the car, if you're not late, which many of us are. Or when you get there, if you didn't arrive late before you get out of the car, it can set you up for hours, or at least a few minutes. So that's main message for today. Practice calm whenever you can. Do meditation sessions regularly, as much as you can. And on a day you can't, just recognize it's a valuable opportunity. You didn't manage for this day, but don't get involved in scolding yourself, hating. That's not going to help. Just recognize that you would like to and see if you can't do it the next day. So Shantideva makes the very important point, which I actually didn't get until very recently, even though I've been reading this text since, I don't know, first time probably in the late 70s. No, in the early 70s. After talking about the disadvantages of squandering our energy into distraction of various kinds that seem to be provoked by other people, but we're the ones getting distracted. We're the ones sitting between those fangs. Why not put your energy into a different kind of orientation to other people? Recognizing that however badly they're behaving, they want happiness. And you in your core want them to have happiness and be free of suffering. That's a different way. Oh, these people are so horrible. And they are really vicious people. But you know, they're suffering too. They're experiencing, probably many of them, honestly, are pretty traumatized. So instead of getting ratcheted up about annoyance, we can have compassion. They're not recognizing their potential to be a calm and optimally functioning human being, never mind an arhat or a Buddha. Until finally we seek to exchange our focus on our own happiness for a focus on others. Now that's a transcending, right, of ordinary. That's going to another shore. And the indifference that we feel about others, most others' happiness, we're more even-minded about our own. Happy, sad, I want to have bodhicitta. And finally, it comes together because in order to be fully liberated, the reason we practice the 6 perfections is so that we can embrace and digest wisdom and be free, and then really be in a position to help others. And there are 2 ways to begin to untie all of the different knots that we call my sense of self, my me-ness, the me, the various ways in which we feel proud or we feel inferior, both of which are pretty addictive ways of holding on to a self. Wisdom will undo that, will cut it completely. And bodhicitta also unwinds the ordinary sense of self. So right here in this chapter, in this discussion of concentration, we have a reflection on the ways in which we allow ourselves to be distracted in interactions with others, get involved in afflictions, a completely different orientation towards others through cultivating exchange of self and other, through cultivating love and compassion, tonglen, exchange of self and other, giving happiness, taking others' pain. And in the process, opening us even more to the wisdom that will finally free us. And that's the other shore. And that other shore, as we're going to talk about in deep ways, starting in January, and have been, that's the essence of Dzogchen really, it's actually the closest thing to us, but we don't see it. And even though we don't see it, we hear about it. And that is tremendously heartening. Compassion takes courage. Courage is related to the French word cœur, also the Latin heart, right? So we hearten ourselves. We hearten ourselves by settling into calm. We hearten ourselves by opening to love and compassion. And finally, we fully open to wisdom. Okay. Well, hello, Eric. Nice to see you. I thought you were somebody else completely. So now I know. Okay, folks. So we'll take a little break, even maybe a 2-minute break, and then we'll start with our practice, which will allow us to experience some of the calm that we've been aspiring to. We stay on this channel. Is that right, Emily? People don't need to.
Yes, that's right. You stay here.
Okay.